Welcome to Your Path to Nonprofit Leadership, the weekly podcast that features the very best in career development in the nonprofit sector. I'm your host, Patton McDowell, and in addition to podcasting, I'm a leadership coach, a strategy and fundraising consultant, a speaker, and an author. Speaking of being an author, check out my book. It's also titled Your Path to Nonprofit Leadership. And if you'd like a copy or access to any of our firm's resources, just go to pattonmcdowell.com. Thanks as always for listening, and I know you're going to enjoy this fantastic conversation I had with Georgia Krueger, who has the benefit of great leadership experience and the ability to articulate the lessons she's gained from multiple organizations, including the YMCA and the Ada Jenkins Center, a wonderful human services organization from which she recently retired. Now, with 4 decades of experience, you'd expect some great takeaways, and Georgia certainly delivers. And whether you're early on your path to nonprofit leadership or perhaps debating retirement or a transition, you're going to really enjoy Georgia's thoughtful reflection and advice. As always, don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode. It's number 163. Just go to the new podcast page at pattonmcdowell.com and you'll find all of the resources Georgia and I discussed, as well as more information on her and the work she continues to do in retirement. Although I teased her, I'm not sure she's really retired, but you will continue to find resources that she identified by checking out the show notes for this episode. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Georgia Krueger. Georgia, thank you for joining me on the path.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for including me, Patton.
I'm excited to continue conversations we have had over the years. You have had a wonderful nonprofit leadership journey, lots of lessons, lots of advice to offer, and I know, frankly, our listeners are going to benefit from our conversation right now. Let me start with this. Before we talk about your journey, you have a perspective right now, having recently kind of finished, if you will, an executive role. What most concerns you as you look around to nonprofit leadership in our sector?
That's a great question, Patton. And there are really 2 things that most concern me. One is the fact that nonprofit leaders just don't get the appropriate pay. People think, oh, it's nonprofit, so the leaders shouldn't get paid. Why? They're doing the exact same work someone is in the private sector, and yet the expectation is, oh, no, you're not worth it. And then, we obviously have seen the gender disparity, but then see how much more that impacts a female in the nonprofit sector. But the other thing that is also really on my heart is the fact that nonprofit leaders just don't take care of themselves. They, work themselves to the bone. And that's, then all of a sudden they flame out and they're gone. And the nonprofit world has lost another great leader.
So well put and spot on. And you're right. I think particularly for a female executive, you have the double-edged sword that is going against you. And we're going to unpack, I know the better care, self-care is something you're really big on and you have great ideas about. Let me go back to the compensation issue. Did you see any progress through your career? I mean, are funders more aware of that, or did you still find yourself fighting against that? Well, it's nonprofit. You don't need to make as much.
Both.
Right.
I do. The North Carolina Center for Nonprofits at one point really took that on as a, I don't want to use the word battle, but as an important issue. And for example, the majority of the state conference one year was really focused on that. And it was excellent. It was excellent information, great research. But then, like a lot of things, it just kind of was like, okay, we're going to really help this. But then things just fell off the
Nothing happened.
radar.
Yeah.
So, so there, I mean, I think there probably has been some progress. I do think some funders are more aware of it and more willing to climb that mountain with nonprofit leaders.
Right.
And they're even doing things like recognizing the need for a sabbatical, which in some ways is a compensation issue.
And self-care maybe too, right?
Oh,
In some
definitely.
respects. Speaking of your advice there, but
Yes.
is your advice on this front? I mean, is the compensation issue in some ways one organization at a time? Do you suggest a nonprofit leader and they need to advocate for themselves with their own board?
Absolutely. And I think they need to do a much better job up front of negotiating salary.
Yeah, good point.
So that, and at the same token, really educating their boards on why that matters. But I do think as a sector, we need to continue to bring that issue to the forefront and educate people.
Yes.
I heard someone say something about an organization in our area, which I won't name, but they were all in a tither because the leader was making a decent salary. And they're like, oh, I'm not giving to them anymore. I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
That is so ridiculous. Think about the size of their budget. Think about all the things that are being managed here.
Complexity of their organization, right?
Exactly. So I try to take it on as my mantle, but if there has to be more than one or two people, we have to do that as a sector as well.
Well, I'm glad to lift up your voice, and I know you're not alone, and I'm seeing some glimmers of hope. I notice AFP and other organizations are requiring compensation be posted for their jobs, which I hope brings, to your point, an education. I've noticed organizations are now saying, wow, maybe we're not paying enough if other organizations are posting, frankly, more appropriate salaries. But we have work to do there for sure, Georgia. Thank you for kind of lifting that up. And we're going to talk more about self-care.
Sure, I do agree that there's progress being made.
Okay, well, not quite where we need it to be, but yes,
Right.
we're hopefully even efforts like our conversation, awareness is where it starts.
Absolutely.
And that's gonna help. But all right, so why did you get into this nonprofit space? You knew, you had your eyes wide open, perhaps,
Sort of.
about compensation, or maybe that's something you learned the hard way, right? But why did you get into this game?
Well, I got into it so long ago that honestly, and this is going to sound so funny, but my first full-time nonprofit job was as the Aquatics Director at the Rock Hill, South Carolina YMCA.
Wow.
Well, and I took the job after having turned it down the year before. I was teaching school, and I took the job because the Y offered me more money than what I was being paid as a school teacher.
Yeah, that's a whole nother tragic compensation issue, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Now that didn't really last very long, but so in some ways I just accidentally started working in the nonprofit world. I went as a aquatics director and head swim coach, and that grew into fitness and program leadership over, all the programs for that Y. And then I moved on. I went back to grad school, and then somewhat accidentally ended up back with the Y at Camp Thunderbird as one of the directors there. And then from there, I knew that I had to make a decision. And my decision was, do I stay with camping? Do I stay with YMCA camping? Or do I stay with the YMCA? So ultimately, my decision was I stay with the YMCA. And that was the point at which I moved on to the Lake Norman YMCA. Like many things I've done in my career, thinking I was going to be there 3 years and was there closer to 20.
Well, what were the factors you ponder? And I bet we have many listeners that maybe they're early in their career, they like what they're doing, but obviously the why had something meaningful for you to keep you there for several decades. What was it?
There were a lot of things actually at the time. Um, I loved the people. Probably that's number one.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's been number one for me in all of my jobs. Going to the Ada Jenkins Center, just amazing people.
Yeah.
The opportunity to be there was a gift to me. So the people was one. It was easy to be passionate about the work. If you had asked me when I was the aquatics director if I would ever be in a director role, I would have just scoffed. It's like, no way. I'm not going to do that. And obviously, we see how that went. I end up as a CEO of an amazing organization.
Well, and those organizations, your senior leadership at the Y, and then of course Ada Jenkins benefited from all of your talents. And I guess again, let me go back because I know again a lot of listeners pondering transition in our sector. You're at the Y for 20 some years, right? So what were you looking for, and what helped you make the decision to go to Ada Jenkins?
Biggest thing was I knew it was time. And my husband and he is significantly younger than I am, significantly, but I had convinced him, and he was game, that we needed to buy a travel trailer and wander around the country.
Wow.
Yes. So we actually quit our jobs on the same day, had that travel trailer, packed it up, and took off for 14 months.
Wow.
And we wandered. We had no itinerary other than like 2 times we had to be somewhere to meet people, but otherwise we just wandered. But then when we knew it was time to come home, we were ready to come home. And funnily enough, that's not a word, but I like it.
That is funny.
I had been offered a job on a ranch in Colorado, which originally we really thought that I would take it and we'd stay in Colorado, and I got to, chase after cows and run basically a conference center on a ranch.
Right.
But once we got home, we were like, no, we're home. We need to stay home. And
Well, it sounds like almost a sabbatical. Was that almost like a sabbatical in some sense, right?
It was, because when I did choose to leave the Y, it wasn't because I didn't still love the Y or believe in the mission or not love the people. But like I said, I knew it was time for me to leave. And part of what helped me with that is, as I thought through it, I realized that if I just stayed in that spot, I was in somebody else's way of moving into that leadership role.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's been a big one for me. It's just that recognition of, oh, wait a minute, I'm not the best person for this anymore. There's somebody else who's waiting in the wings that needs to be doing this. So it was very much like a sabbatical also.
Yeah. But good for you for recognizing, because again, I think maybe deep down, a lot of us realize that, it is time to go, that this organization would be better served. And so good for you that you recognize that, because some people frankly don't, and they stay too long and the organization suffers. But you did move on, and it was good for the Y, and obviously good for Ada Jenkins as you arrived there. I'm curious about when you got to the kind of the big chair, of executive leadership at Ada Jenkins, surprises, or did you feel like, you were prepared as you kind of look back on that transition?
Both.
Yeah, that's fair.
I did feel like I was prepared. The Y had been a wonderful learning platform for me. And especially at the time with the Y, we were pretty decentralized. At the end of my career, we had moved towards a more centralized leadership model. But at the time, most of us who were executive director level were really running our organizations, and that was a great opportunity that prepared me and prepared other people to be able to move into a new role. And I'm one of those people that believes fully that we need to be training our staff and allowing them the opportunity to both succeed and to fail. And I believe that senior staff of the organization need to be very relational with the board members, that they should know each other, that those senior leaders should attend board meetings.
Nice.
I believe that. And I was given the opportunity to do that. And so that prepared me. On the other hand, anytime you go somewhere new, there are going to be surprises.
Yeah, right.
But it also helped that I had been closely involved with Ada Jenkins Center before that. I had actually been on the Ada Jenkins Center board. And there are pictures of me painting the building when we were initially doing the renovations.
Wow. As a volunteer, in essence, you were a volunteer painter.
Oh, I was 100% a volunteer.
Wow. Well, I want to come back to that too, because board service is something that you have been particularly good at, and I'm guessing has helped you. But let me first go back to your point of positioning your senior leaders for leadership themselves. Because I've seen, Georgia, and I know you have too, some executives are like, no, I interact with the board. I'm the only one that goes to the board meeting. So clearly you let your staff be involved there. Were there other things you did to help position your senior team for leadership?
I think, yes, having them be the liaison to even board committees and other committees. And so that I didn't have to be at all those meetings. And I wasn't doing it because it was a way out for me. I was doing it because it was a learning opportunity for them. And some of the meetings I would attend, or I'd attend them sporadically, but I wanted the staff to be the people who were either providing the leadership or working closely with the leadership to do that. I also encouraged our staff to really have the opportunity to work in partnership with other organizations.
Interesting. Yep.
Yeah. And to be part of, anybody knows that whoever works in a nonprofit is doing fundraising, whether you want to admit it or not.
Yep,
because
exactly
it's
right.
Relationship building. And I really encouraged our staff to recognize that, and we would learn about that, or at least I hope they did, and be able to apply that to other situations in life, and not just the fundraising, but the ways of working with other organizations. Fortunately, I've had staff who even started other organizations that were close to the work we were doing, but not what we could do.
Right. But that's
So
tribute
those are
to
things.
the people you developed, right? Had the
Right.
ability to in turn start complementary organizations, which I think is really impressive. How did you approach hiring talent? Clearly, you had a methodology of leadership once they got there, but many people listening are like, all right, if I wanted to work for somebody like Georgia at a nonprofit, what were you looking for?
People who are smarter than I am.
Yeah. How did you determine that?
Excellent question. And I think some of it's gut.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I happen to be a person who I believe that often the Holy Spirit is our gut.
Yeah.
And because I found anytime that I heard, for example, as I was hiring, anything that told me that wasn't the right person, that every time I ignored that, it was not a good move.
Your gut was right all along, wasn't it?
Exactly. And I just felt like that was important. Also, something I've always said in my career is I hire people. I don't hire skill sets.
Okay.
If someone is smart, can build relationships, and is willing to work hard, we can teach them almost anything. I can't teach you to be a nice person.
Interesting. It's, of course, makes perfect sense. But I guess sometimes we are guilty as leaders, right? We do jump to the skill set, or maybe we're over impressed with some skill set, and then our gut's telling us, well, hey, but this person may not be a good fit here.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
You're right on, brother.
Yeah, well, thank you. I've learned from you, and I'm impressed that, again, you hire for that kind of fit, and then you let them do their job. In other words, because I can see some leaders saying, yeah, I don't know if I'm totally comfortable with my team interacting with the board directly or out in the community directly. So I'm guessing there were times when maybe you were nervous about it, or
Sure.
you just felt like, hey, but this is an experience I need to give them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they failed or if they messed up, the world still hadn't ended.
That's right.
And, but it's important, and even coming back to this concept of self-care and sabbatical.
Yeah.
We don't learn from our failures any more than we learn from our successes, unless we take the time to process them. Then we can learn from it, because then we can say, oh, wait a minute, this is where it went off the rails, and this is how I could do it differently. Or this is what made it great. How can I make it even greater, knowing what I now know? And if we don't allow people to have that opportunity, whether it is to super succeed or super make the mistakes,
Yes,
then they're not going to learn from it. And how fair is that?
yeah, doesn't help them get better, though, does
Right.
it? And
I really do want to let people just do their jobs. I don't need to do their job and
well,
mine.
well put. And often understaffed nonprofit environments, we need everyone working at full capacity. And to your point, we're burning out maybe senior leaders who, in some cases, now some of it is external, I get, but would you agree that sometimes these nonprofit leaders are kind of taking on everything and they're not delegating, right? And thus burning out.
100%. 100%.
How do we help these nonprofit leaders better take care of themselves? It sounds like reflection and or even a sabbatical, if possible. Are there other, what else would you encourage leaders to do to take care of themselves?
Something like a sabbatical is a really big deal.
Yep.
And it requires a lot of commitment from everybody who's involved. But there are a lot of small things that nonprofit leaders can do. And when I'm talking about nonprofit leaders, I'm talking about people who are not way up on the totem pole. They can burn themselves out as quickly
Just as well. Yep.
Somebody who's at the pinnacle of their careers. And, otherwise that person may not make it. And so I really think it's important for people to be reflective and to recognize that, wait a minute, I need this, and nobody else is going to do it for me. I have to find a way to take care of myself. But it's not the same for any of us.
Well, right. I was going to say, but I'm struck by, you do seem to have a process for reflection. Is that, if I am able to get a sabbatical from my organization, would you encourage me to, I don't know, take my annual review and ponder the kind of feedback I've gotten from people, or or is it just less formal than that? I just need to reflect on some challenges or mistakes that I encountered, and talk about how you, I guess, utilize reflection maybe in your own experience.
The first thing they need to do in a sabbatical is rest.
Yeah.
And that has to be the top priority. And not thinking, oh, I still have to work the whole time. That's not a sabbatical.
That's not, yeah, you're not unplugged then, are you?
No, exactly. And it is critical, I believe, for people to truly unplug. And that's not just during a sabbatical. If you're not working on the weekend, then you need to not be working. If you're not working at night, you need to not work. You don't have to answer the phone every time. You don't have to answer every text right that minute. That's so unhealthy. And that's us societally.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do believe it's really, and granted, this is my world, but I think that it's especially true in the nonprofit world.
Well, and I think, but I know you'll agree with this, but it's important for the leader to kind of model this, right? I think a lot of leaders say that, yet they're sending emails out at 11 o'clock at night. And
Or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly, which is sad, and I get it. But did you find you had to be even more intentional about showing your team that, hey, don't email me after a certain time, or how did you model that?
Well, at one point, I jokingly told people if they communicated with us while they were on vacation, they were going to be fired.
But you had to make your point, though, didn't you?
Exactly. And I did. I hope that I modeled it. When I was at the Y, I definitely did not. And I, to this day, feel really bad about that.
It
Because
kind of took around the clock. I mean, you were getting hit up around the clock, basically.
Yeah. I felt like in some ways, oh, I have to be the first person here in the morning and the last person who leaves at night, and I need to check in and be here every weekend. That's not true.
And not healthy either,
Right.
is it?
And again, the world won't stop spinning.
Well, and something else, Georgia, you're a great advocate of just kind of health and wellness. Have you found what is your advice on that front? I mean, again, we all kind of know we need to take better care of ourselves, but I'm guessing you're seeing folks that just aren't doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I believe that it is important for people to find the things that feed their souls. But I don't care if you say, I hate to run. The people who are doing fitness related activities, it certainly doesn't have to be running.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other ways to do things. But research has shown repeatedly that people who are exercising are more focused, sleep better, feel better, have a higher quality of life. I mean, I can just go on.
Yeah.
They're healthier. But it doesn't mean you have to go out there and kill yourself, but getting at least 30 minutes a day, at least 3 days a week. I mean, that's so minimal. And it doesn't even have to be 30 minutes all at the same time. I think it's important for people to recognize things like if they're able to stand at their desk. Standing desks were a wonderful revolution, in my opinion.
We're too sedentary, aren't we? We got to get up and do something.
Yeah, even sitting on one of the big fitness balls, that because you're having to work on balance and it's making your proprioceptors work. I really encourage walking meetings.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, granted, we don't want to do that when it's middle of summer and 95 degrees, but for the rest of the year, there's really, for most places, now I don't know, how many people are listening to the podcast who are from somewhere else, not in North Carolina.
Right.
But mostly for the rest of the year, we can do that. So there's just this huge plethora of opportunities of what you can do. Something that we did at the Ada Jenkins Center is we would do full day retreats that really focused on taking care of people.
So not the
And
business of the organization. It was literally,
it was really all about people. Um, there were times that we would do chair massages, uh, we would do manicures and pedicures. We were really fortunate to have this great partnership with a salon and spa in Cornelius, and they would just do really nice stuff for our staff. We had a Christmas party there one year, and they just plied us with services.
it's
And it was
nice.
just, yeah. So it made it affordable as a way for us to do it. But then another time we spent the day and used some space at a local church and had someone, a counselor, to come in and speak about ways to take care of yourself, possibilities of things that you could do. And again, interspersed in that, we had some things that were just feel good. Granted, that is not what everybody needs,
Right.
but we all need to be pampered a little bit.
Well, and especially for all things you said, the stress, but I fear too many, even those listening, we don't do that. When we have a retreat, it's more work, right? It's
Uh,
it's
Yep,
not relief. It's
yep.
a continuation. And so your point again, reiterated very nicely, is that as leaders, we need to be more sensitive to that, or we indeed are going to burn everybody off.
Mhm. And we have to take the lead.
Right. Right. Modeling it again starts at the top, doesn't it? And
So,
you
with
did
most
that.
things.
Right. Right. Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to shift gears in terms your service on boards, it seems to me, has been influential and helpful, including your service on an Ada Jenkins Center board, which I guess indirectly or directly led to an opportunity for employment. So, in other words, if I'm a listener, Georgia, is board service might have multiple benefits, or how would you speak to your board service as it relates to, your career?
Another great question, Patton. I do think that there is significant impact for nonprofit leaders to spend time working on other boards,
Yep.
to be board members, potentially, if they're not ready for board membership, to be committee members for other nonprofit organizations. There's no question to me that my my board leadership experience with the Ada Jenkins Center helped, that later on I ended up with the opportunity to be in the executive director and then CEO role.
Right.
Um, because in part, we had done a lot of partnership work with the Y when I was there. And so I knew the organization well as a result of being on that board. As and the same is true of other boards. And sometimes those boards are complementary to the work that my organization was doing.
Right.
For example, I'm on the board for the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. And most of you who know me are going to start laughing when you hear that, because I am so far from being a lawyer. So there's a few of us who are on that board who are nonprofit leaders, and I just laugh sometimes when I look around the room. I'm like, oh, Georgia and the lawyers. Okay,
but they need your perspective. I can all but guarantee.
yeah, that's exactly right, and that is why I was invited to be on that board, because the people that the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy serves are the people that the Ada Jenkins Center served. And we would partner at in certain opportunities, whether it was with our individual clients or whether it was on a bigger scale organizationally. And that was helpful for both organizations. I have remained on that board, at least for the currently, and I've continued to learn.
Nice.
when I was, yeah, I mean, it really has been helpful. But then was on another board, which I am about to roll off as the board chair in approximately 15 days.
Not that you're counting, right? But
Not that
it's
I'm counting or
close.
anything, yeah. But that too, I mean, that is something that is totally unrelated to work, except, and wait till I get to the except, but it is so close to my heart.
Yeah.
It's a place that, this is where it gets important, has been a place, is a place where I have gone. It's a retreat center. It's an individual retreat center called Well of Mercy, which I highly recommend, where I could go and be refilled, where I could go and rest, where I could nap, where I could walk, and not be expected to have a conversation with anybody. I developed progressive napping one day at Well of Mercy.
Interesting.
Oh, yes. I think everybody should learn progressive napping. Forget progressive dinners. We're going for progressive napping. I started in a hammock, and then it got a little too shady, or no, the sun came out and it was too hot. So I moved to another hammock, which was more in the woods, but then I got cold. So then I went and laid down on this bench that the river goes under. And I laid there a little bit and I thought, this is really hard. Why don't I just go get in bed? Which I did. And, it filled me up. It gave me the rest I needed, which obviously comes full circle to taking care of yourself.
Yes.
I've been going to this place for 25 years because it filled me up. At one point, the board, Ada Jenkins, was allowing me to go there as not as a vacation day,
Yep.
once a month,
Yep.
as a paid day. And then I would go for a couple of days longer, once a quarter, with the idea that not only would I take time just to rest, but I would do some work on the organization, not in the organization, but on the organization.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, the practical value of your board service. In some cases, maybe it was more strategic, if you will, in terms of the actual governance activity. But it sounds like this one obviously had a personal as well as a professional appeal. And I love how you leveraged it, frankly, to help, take care of yourself. So, and you had a board, I guess, that was receptive to that yes, they knew if we keep you recharged, Georgia, everything goes better back at the office, so to speak.
It's 100% true. And it's true for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think organizations who will give their staff a day off or half a day off, that they're being paid for. It's not counting as their vacation time. We would do that, occasionally. And so it just gives people that knowledge that they are really cared for by their organization. And it gives them a time to do whatever is recharging them, just to be filled up.
Totally understand and applaud that effort on both sides, you for your proactivity, and of course your board. And I hope some listeners right now will think about, it doesn't address the full compensation issues, but it seems to me it did address a little bit that you have a better kind of employer relationship if you're allowed to unwind like that and recharge. And so I'm glad that you lifted up. And I guess one more thing I want to ask you about, because we have listeners, Georgia, that whether it's near term or maybe further down the road are pondering their retirement. And of course, you are far from retired personally. You're very busy and active. But as a nonprofit leader, you have fairly recently had to contemplate retirement. I wonder if you could talk about how you assured a smooth transition, because I think a lot of nonprofit leaders are like, I don't know what to do, and I just am going to hang on. It sounds you are more proactive.
Oh, yeah. some of the best advice I was ever given in my career was when I was at Camp Thunderbird with Bill Clymer. And he looked me in the face and he said, put every penny you can into your retirement account. And he was spot on.
Wow.
I didn't put every penny that I should have, but I sure did put a lot of them. And that's what allowed me to retire. So for those of you who are young, don't say you can't afford to do it. Do it, because that's going to protect you in the long run and make it possible for you to be able to retire. It made a huge difference for me, both I think personally and even for the organization, because I didn't feel like I just was going to have to stay there forever just to be able to support my family
Financially. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And much like the YMCA, I knew that it was time for me to leave. I I was tired. I loved what I did. I love, not past tense, I love the people that I have had the opportunity to work with. And one of the fun things about retirement is that now I get to be their friend. I don't have to in any way, shape, or form be part of their, who supervises them. I just get to be friends with people, and I'm having some great times with
That's
a
nice.
lot of people.
So you
Yeah.
didn't feel like you had to completely unplug from the relationships you built there. Now
Yeah.
you can enjoy the good parts, frankly, of
Yeah.
that, and not. Uh, well, Georgia, your journey, as I knew, is fascinating and wonderfully full of advice. As you ponder all the topics, because there's been advice in every section, if you will. Anything else as you think about somebody who's pondering nonprofit leadership or moving into executive leadership? Any other advice you might offer?
I'd say advocate for yourself, whether it's that beginning stage where you are negotiating, whether it's salary or time off or whatever it is, but to continue to do that for yourself throughout your career. I would also say, especially for young staff, uh, start the habit of taking care of yourself, of
Yep.
protecting your time off, of of recognizing that nobody's going to do this for you, but you've got to take care of yourself. So I think that's really important. And the biggest thing I would say to people who are moving into executive leadership is you are more than more of a role model than you recognize. So keep it in mind, because what you're doing, positive or negative, at work or not, staff are paying attention to it.
Yes.
And I think often we have no idea when they're paying attention, much less that they are paying attention.
Right. Right.
And so we have great opportunities and great responsibility to help enhance other people's lives.
Beautifully put. Thank you. Great advice, multiple pieces of advice to give our listeners something to ponder. One other parting gift that you knew was coming, or my request, is, of course, something you might add to our reading list. Have you got a book or two that maybe was meaningful to you that you would recommend for our listeners?
As a matter of fact, I have several.
Thought you might.
You shouldn't have given me this question up front. But one is a book by Laurie Beth Jones that's called Jesus CEO. It's
Yeah.
a great leadership book. Another is called Eat That Frog.
Good one.
Yes, it's a short, appears to be a children's book, but it gives amazing advice for those of us who are in not just in life.
Yes, good.
It
It's on the
doesn't
shelf behind me. I love it. Yes.
There you go. Another is an old book. The next two are pretty old books, but still apropos to today. One is Leading at the Speed of Change by Daryl Connor.
Nice.
When I was with the Y, which obviously has been a long time ago now, I left in 2004, I
Okay.
think. Um, we had used that at a retreat at some point in the past, I don't know, however many years from that. And it has always stuck with me. I've gone back and read it additional times. And the last one is a book by a guy named Doug Hall, Jumpstart Your Brain. And Doug is a fascinating guy. I actually had the opportunity while I was with the YMCA to go to a think tank at his place. And that was one of the greatest experiences I ever had. But
Love that.
Jumpstart Your Brain.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you did not disappoint, Georgia. You gave us a bonus or 4, actually, to add to our book list. And so for that, I am grateful. You're definitely not retired, Georgia. What are you doing these days, and where can people find out more about you?
Well, the thing I'm doing that's the most fun is I'm teaching Pilates at a little Pilates studio in Davidson.
Yes.
I'm serving on a couple of boards. I'm doing volunteer stuff with my church, and I'm working out,
Good for
taking
you.
care of myself.
Good for you.
I take naps. That's something that just gives me so much pleasure. And I'm doing something that I never would have thought that I would do, but I'm watching Netflix.
So you allow a little bit of entertainment, it sounds like, in your life. You're taking care of yourself, but Netflix is there as well.
Yeah. Oh, and part of watching Netflix, part of that is because I don't have to, think. I can just be brainless. I'm doing that with audiobooks. I just get to be there and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, you have earned that right, no doubt. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for all you have done in and outside of the nonprofit sector. And thank you so much for joining me on the path.
Well, thank you. I have just really enjoyed this time together, and it's just nice to connect with you, Patton.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Georgia as much as I did and came away with some practical ideas that can guide your professional journey, whether you're early on that path or you're later in your career. Don't forget about the show notes. They are available on our website, pattonmcdowell.com. You can find out more about Georgia and the multiple resources we discussed. Remember, this is episode number 163. As always, I'd be grateful if you would share this episode with someone else on the nonprofit path. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe. Just go to the podcast page at pattonmcdowell.com and you'll see the follow button, and follow equals subscribe. And that will assure you don't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. They come out every Thursday. Of course, if you like this episode, click on the episodes button at the top of the page and you can scroll through thumbnails of some of our most popular episodes or search by topic or even guest name. Thanks again for all you're doing in the nonprofit sector, especially right now. And keep up the good work for causes that are most meaningful to you. I'll keep bringing you content that can help you do it even better. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time on The Path.